Travis Terrell already has some name recognition after a monster freshman season, but I think that 2025 will be his true breakout campaign. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current site expert at Who Dat Dish and contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusive. Starts with an S and ends with an S. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Albany State, who apparently has all of the offensive talent in the SIAC. Speaking of the SIAC, Clark Atlanta gets back their top receiver, Armone Harris, after thinking that he was going to transfer to Johnson C. Smith. But let's kick this whole thing off with Travis Terrell, who I believe is in for a super sophomore season because he's already one of those players that he's already a guy who has some name recognition, but going into 2025, he's actually going to be a player who is on the Walter Payton watch list, which is the best offensive player in the country on the FCS level. And this is kind of where I want to take this because he's one of three. It's also Jacobian Morgan, his quarterback, and then Kevon King, the running back out of Norfolk State. We'll get to those two later in the episode, or really later in this segment. But I want to kick things off with Travis Terrell because the fact that he's on this list as a Walter Payton watch list player tells me that there is some idea that he is going to explode as an offensive threat. And that's how I feel about Terrell going into his sophomore season as well. So let's kick off with the first and the younger of the Jackson State duo, Travis Terrell. In my opinion, Terrell can be a superstar in 2025. I think he's already, this is the thing. Travis Terrell already has name recognition, right? Like he plays for Jackson State. Jackson State just won the championship. He was a highlight player on that team. And when I say highlight player, I don't mean he was the top running back, but he literally produced a bunch of highlights for that team. Travis Terrell has name recognition. Projecting someone who already has a name to be a breakout superstar feels a little bit odd, but I also feel like there's another gear that Terrell can kick it into, and I expect he will kick it into that gear in 2025. As a sophomore, things will be a little bit different. There is no Irv Mulligan, right? Because we have to understand, when it comes to Travis Terrell, the name recognition comes from what he did as a special teamer. It comes from what he did as a return specialist. And I'll give you one thing else. I don't typically like to throw legendary names, big-time names, right? Either superstars, potential Hall of Famers. I don't really like to throw those names on players. But I'm not going to give him the expectation of either one of these players. But Travis Terrell's trajectory does remind me of Steve Smith, and it reminds me of Tyreek Hill. And I'm not saying that he's going to go on to be a potential Hall of Famer, right? Because Steve Smith is one of those. I think Tyreek Hill, when it's all said and done, will be one of those potential Hall of Famers. I'm not putting that level of pressure on him. But when you look at Tyreek Hill and you look at Steve Smith, what they did at the beginning of their professional career is they got into the mix and they gained a name because of what they did as return specialists. Jalen Ramsey he famously said that's a return specialist when talking about Tyreek Hill going into, I can't remember what season that was, but it was one of the things that Jalen Ramsey highlighted. And then you saw the ascension of Tyreek Hill from being a return specialist to being an all-pro wide receiver. I think that Travis Terrell is on that same plan. I think that Travis Terrell will have that same type of ascension because, in my opinion, you already have guys like you already got guys like Tyreek Hill. You already got guys like Steve Smith who have kind of set this blueprint, but now he has the room to grow. And this wasn't the case last year because at the end of the day, it's Irv Mulligan. Irv Mulligan was the guy. Irv Mulligan was the monster. Irv Mulligan was the lead running back for Jackson State. And there was no room for anybody else to really hold that role. There was no one else. There was no room for anybody else to really be complimentary. And I think Travis Terrell was the closest thing to it. But all in all, he still wasn't like a 700-yard runner. They weren't sharing the rock. That was Irv Mulligan's backfield. I expected to be a little bit more split in 2025. I expect that there will be a little bit more of even amount of touches between guys like Terrell, guys like Ahmad Miller, right? I expect there to be a more even backfield, but it wouldn't shock me if Travis Terrell becomes the top guy for Jackson State in the backfield in 2025. He didn't have that opportunity because Irv Mulligan was there last year. Instead, he came and he made an impact, top 5 in multiple statistics as far as a return specialist. But that's what I'm looking for out of Travis Terrell. He already had a name, but most of that name was received, or most of that name was built off of being a return specialist. What is he going to do as a running back? I've been excited for a while. I think that this news of him being on the Walter Payton watch list is just an excuse. Really, it's just an excuse for me to come in and say something that I've been wanting to say, and that is projecting a breakout season. He has 6 yards a pop. 6 yards per carry every time he touched the ball. So and I want to see if he's going to be more of a receiving threat. There's a lot of question when it comes to Travis Terrell. Is he going to be the focal point of the running attack? Is he going to be a complementary role? Is he going to catch more passes out of the backfield? How much is he going to balance between being a running back and being a return specialist? These are all questions that I want to know. These are all questions I'll be looking forward to finding the answer to. And honestly, I think these are the type of questions that will define the 2025 campaign for Travis Terrell. He's already a step below household name, but he's already well known. I think that this could be a breakout season where he does make that step from very well known to being a household name. And don't let Jackson State have the same level of success that they had last year. Everybody's going to be talking about Travis Terrell by the end of the season if all of these things fall into place. But let's continue talking about his teammate, Jacobian Morgan. Jacobian Morgan, I'm actually really happy for him that he got this recognition because a lot of times, and I think this is the first, if not, give some room, maybe one of the first times that I've seen Morgan be praised on a national level. A lot of times I see the praise, it's SWAC, it's HBCUs, and to me, national praise is more special. And I know I hate when I say this because I always think it's easy to misinterpret. It's easy to kind of make an assumption that I'm prioritizing other media over our own. That's not what's happening. What I'm prioritizing is being a big fish in a bigger pool, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like state, region, national, right? Like you can be the best in your city, but are you one of the best in your state? The larger that the pool gets, if you still remain as a high-ranking member of that group, you are really making a statement. And at the end of the day, it's not a disrespect or a discredit of HBCU talent. It's not a discredit of SWAC talent. It's just that the pool is smaller. Conference player of the year, national player of the year. It's a lot different. It's a lot different. So if he's in that mix as being one of the top quarterbacks in the country, that means there's way more quarterbacks to pick from. You got, 12 SWAC quarterbacks to pick from, and saying Jacobian Morgan is the best, that's still good. But what about when there's hundreds to pick from, and Jacobian Morgan is one of the best? To me, that speaks volumes. So it's not, I want to clarify that, and I'll probably do this again because I'm always uncomfortable every time I make this statement because I feel like it's easy, really easy to misinterpret, and I never want it to be misinterpreted because I think that so often we are passed over. So then when I say something like this, it seems like I'm falling right in line with the passing over. I'm not. This is just my criteria as the bigger the pool, the higher you rank, the more impressive it is. That's my personal opinion. And I think that's pretty easy to say. I really do. If you're the top 1 out of 100 versus the top 1 out of 1,000, that means you're better than more people. But anyway, so I was really happy. I'm going to keep it brief with him. We've talked about Morgan at length on this show. I'm very excited to see what he does commanding this ship going for a repeat. But let's get into Kevon King, because when it comes to King, he's coming off of a near 1,000-yard season. I mean, he's a player who I want to see how he's used. And I'm not in the same way as Travis Terrell, but very similar, right? Because there's no special team aspect that I'm focusing on. This is purely what he does in the backfield. He's going into a new system. You have Michael Vick, who's coming in at Norfolk State. My thing about this is I feel like Vick has talked about Israel Carter at length. I feel like he has talked about Israel Carter at length. I can't help but feel like they're going to pass the ball a good amount. Maybe a good amount of RPOs, right? Like maybe you have a read option offense. But I think the difference between being a read option offense where your quarterback actually runs, right? Because they did a lot of read options, but I'm catching a blank. Jalen Daniels, he didn't do a lot of running. Though they did a lot of read, he didn't take off a lot. And I thought he was decently athletic, but he didn't really tote the rock. I think that Israel Carter, if he ends up running, then you got Carter in the mix, you got King in the mix, you probably have another running back in the mix. That could be a lot of touches that are kind of stripped away from King. But if you go run heavy and he's the focal point, that's a whole different conversation. And that's what I'll be looking forward to. Is he the focal point in the running attack, or is he a focal point in the running attack? And how many focal points are in the running attack at Norfolk State? Matter of fact, is running even going to be the focal point of the offense? When it comes to Norfolk State's status, when it comes to the state of Norfolk State, I'm kind of interested because what is Michael Vick going to do? He's a former quarterback. I can assume that if he has confidence in his QB, he's going to want to tote the rock. And he always wanted a guy who was like him. He got it with Carter. So you got a quarterback who he's going to have confidence in to throw the football, confidence in to run the football. When it comes to not the team aspect, but purely on an individual evaluating different players, I wonder what impact that could have on Kevon King. But then again, is that even how he wants to run his offense? So many questions. So many questions. What will Norfolk State look like under Michael Vick? I can't wait. I'm glad that his debut is on prime time. Let's keep forward and let's talk about Armone Harris, who is returning to Clark Atlanta and avoids what would have been a double whammy as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money, and I was talking to the missus earlier today about big money purchases, right? And this is one of the things that we discuss, and I'm sure that you have a partner, you probably discuss it too. So whether you're trying to save up for a trip, whether you're trying to save up for a new car, maybe you're just trying to balance finances with somebody else. Either one of those scenarios applies for Monarch Money. If you want to try to budget to make sure that you're paying or you're saving enough so that you can go on a trip next year, if you just want to get a car, like I said, those things all come into play. But I think one of the underrated aspects about Monarch Money is that it allows you to truly be able to balance and manage your money with somebody else. And that can't always be the easiest, but it allows you to, hey, me and her, we talking. Boom. Let's make sure that we getting everything in order using Monarch Money to do it. So take control of your finances or y'all's finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL. The preseason is here. You want to make sure that you are staying up to date with everything that's going on, not just your team, right? Because let's say that the Bengals have this star wide receiver, but they already got enough guys in the room. But you need somebody who is going to be in your wide receiver room, maybe as wide receiver 4. Now you can go pick up that guy who inevitably gets cut because they already have too many receivers, and now he's your guy. So you want to stay up to date with all of the preseason stars, even if they aren't currently on your team. As we continue moving, though, Armone Harris is returning to Clark Atlanta, and this makes up for what would have been a double whammy for the Panthers. This would have been very tough, and this one is for my mom, who, if she looks at the clock and she knows that it's time for Press Your Luck, no matter what's going on, she's going to watch Press Your Luck. And listen, I'm not talking about she sees it's on. She's talking about, hey, it's 6:34. I done missed 4 minutes of Press Your Luck. So this one is for her because Armone Harris leaving Clark Atlanta would have resulted in not only a whammy, but a double whammy. When you look at the potential loss of him and David Wright, you did lose your quarterback in David Wright, but losing your leading wide receiver in Armone Harris would have been a huge problem because now you're losing the two biggest components. If you're taking out coaching, you're losing the two biggest components of your passing attack. And I think that they should be really lucky that Armone Harris decided to flip around, because you could find your way around it. Other guys emerge. You have a guy like Jamal Jones who is on the team. Maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable with your passing attack, knowing that you're not just left out to dry. I get it. But at the end of the day, Jamal Jones versus Jamal Jones and Armone Harris, which one are we taking? I know which one I'm taking, because two's better than one, right? One guy hit 1,000 and the other nearly hit 1,000. So for me, it's easy. For me, it's easy. This is a big deal, even if you feel like you had the type of guy who could replace him. Because if Jamal Jones replaces, and follow me, if Jamal Jones replaces the importance of Armone Harris, who replaces the importance of Jamal Jones? That's the next question. If Jamal Jones steps up, somebody has to step up to where he was, right? So if he goes from 2-1, who's going to go from 3-2? Or who's going to be the guy who goes from 4-2? Like, who's going to be the guy who steps into the role as a complementary piece that allows you to have the same type of dynamic attack that you had last year? That's going to be difficult, because replacing your quarterback is tough enough. I think that you got a solid guy when it comes to McDonald. Almost said McDaniels. Zy McDonald. Because to me, Zy McDonald is a type of player who he got a little bit of run at Jackson State, but you knew that he was a guy who was very talented. Now he's coming to Clark Atlanta, and he's a guy who showed you something on the FCS level, but wasn't able to get on the field consistently. You would hope that now dropping down to D2, he's able to have a larger impact. You know, it doesn't always work that way, but you would hope that it does. So, yeah, when it comes to Zy McDonald, David Wright, you replace him with Zy McDonald. And now you don't have to replace either of your wide receivers. And I think that's beneficial, because one thing that should be noted is that, yes, you had two wide receivers. One hit 1,000. One was 13 yards away. So you do have two productive wide receivers that are on your team. But Jamal Jones was not a big touchdown guy. That wasn't something that he did a lot of. He did get some touchdowns. He had, I think, 6 on the year, but Harris had 14. So that's a big gap. And I don't know. Touchdowns are so situational. It's difficult to just lump them in one conversation. But in general, when you're looking at your offense, you want to have a guy who can score the football. And knowing that you have a known commodity who can score, big deal. So this offseason in June, he had already hit the portal in April. But in June, Harris announced that he was committing to Johnson C. Smith. Now, a couple of months later, a little under 2, he goes ahead and he says, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go back to Clark Atlanta. You got to remember, all he knows is Teddy Keaton. He was with Keaton at Allen. He was at Keaton. He was with Keaton at Clark. So this is all he knows. And he had some solid years at Allen. He had about 500 and some change, 600 and some change. But last year is when he went absolutely ballistic. Last season is when he went to Clark and he joined with David Wright at Clark. Granted, they had that same connection at Allen, but in Clark, it was different. He went over 1,000 yards after only reaching 600 and something, not even hitting 700. I don't even think you could have rounded it up to 700 without getting the exact number on the top of my head. But that was the big explosion. Now, on the other side of this, you do have Johnson C. Smith, right? Oh, sorry. So Zy McDonald has 2 top receivers to be able to work with. And I was surprised. I thought that Jamal Jones might have transferred. I can't find any news of it. Somebody tell me if I missed that, because I was looking, but I couldn't find any news that he had transferred. I saw something a month ago saying that he was still at Clark, but he also didn't make the All-SIAC list. So that was kind of surprising to me. But yeah, so you get 2 talented wide receivers, 2 all-conference type of wide receivers. So anyway, now let's push forward and look at Johnson C. Smith. After a brief stint there, they were trying to build a powerhouse of their own. They were trying to build their own quarterback and 2 wide receivers that could go crazy. And you still got Brevin Campbell, so you still feel decent. You still feel like with Brevin Campbell, I feel like you have a 1,000-yard receiver. So you still feel comfortable with what Kelvin Durham is going to be throwing to, but man, you wanted that 2-headed monster. I think that there's a benefit to 2 heads, and it's kind of like the upside that Clark is getting. You're also losing that if you're Johnson C. Smith, because Clark, right, if you have 2 wide receivers, most times it's going to be hard to shut down both. Now, I see more people trying to get 3 wide receivers, but if you have 2, it's going to be difficult to shut down both. Clark has that again. Johnson C. Smith almost had it, and now they lost it. but you still have a top guy in Brevin Campbell, so you're okay, right? Nobody is stressing in this situation. You just have one side that's like, dang, we almost had that cherry on top. But ice cream is still good even without it. I don't even like cherries on top, me personally, but, figure of speech. But no figure of speech, more so hyperbolic, but it feels like Albany State has all the talent in the SIAC on the offensive side. So let's get to that as we close out today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. In time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one is a hole-in-one for your energy game. Me personally, I'm just making memories with my friends. I'm not out here doing much, but I'm having a good time. Right. And sometimes I can get a little tired, especially if they want to have an early tea time. Boom. Shot of transfusion and I'm on with my day. So has everybody in your golf group ever pulled off something ridiculous and you say, okay, anything you can do, I can do better. Right. This is when you need transfusion to gear yourself up for that. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use the promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you are meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Apparently, Albany State has all of the offensive talent that is in the SIAC. If you judge it based off of the preseason polls, it's clear that they feel like this is the premier team as far as offense goes. And it's really interesting to me because you go through and I want to pull up all these players that you have. On the first team, might I add, you have an offensive lineman in Noah Stovall. But outside of that, tight end, Gentry Sparks, Albany State. Wide receiver, Jamil Williams, Albany State. Wide receiver, Javion Jackson, Albany State. Running back, Tion White, Albany State. Quarterback, Isaiah Knowles, Albany State. Like these are... You have the running back. You're not going to have 2 running backs, but you have the quarterback, a running back, 2 wide receivers, and the tight end. That's pretty much all of the offensive skill positions. The only thing you're missing is having the second running back. That's it. That's it. You have 1 tight end, 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and 1 quarterback on that first team. You have all but the running back, second running back. Come on, guys. And then if you want to even take it further, you get 2 offensive linemen on the second team. So now that means 3 of your 5 offensive linemen are all conference players. But here comes when things get crazy. Not only do you have the first team tight end, Albany State also has the second team tight end. So from a pure skill position standpoint, Isaiah Knowles is going to have so many people to throw to. When you look at what Isaiah Knowles is going to be able to drop back and work with, first off, he has 3 all-conference players, preseason-wise, all-conference players who are protecting him up front. So he's going to have time to look at, I have this all-conference wide receiver, first team, this all-conference wide receiver, first team, this all-conference tight end, first team, this all-conference tight end, second team, and if I really want to, I could dump it off to my all-conference first team running back, or maybe I could just go ahead and hand it off and allow my 3 offensive linemen who are all-conference, 1 first team, 2 second team, to be able to block for my first team all-conference running back. When you look at Albany State, the weapons at the disposal of the offensive coordinator, I don't even just break it down to Isaiah Knowles. The amount of weapons at the disposal, at the fingertips of the offensive coordinator, from a pure skill standpoint, it should be so easy to get some production out of this. And you look at Knowles. Knowles is a guy who last year, he had 32 touchdowns, which actually surpasses David Wright. David Wright had 31. But he had the most touchdowns in the SIAC last year, and he did it on significantly less attempts. And I think that's probably what's the most interesting when it comes to Knowles, because you look at Knowles, right? Knowles versus Wright. So Wright had 402 attempts. Knowles had 289. Knowles had the better completion percentage. Knowles didn't have the same amount of yards, and I didn't see the yards per attempt. I didn't feel like doing that math, but he had 2,555 yards to Wright's 3,271. That's where the difference as far as receiving or passing yards goes. That's the big thing. But you also look at Knowles, who only had 8 interceptions, so he was pretty safe with the football. And Wright has 16. Like, if we're just comparing them, these guys are closer than you would think. And Knowles, with Wright out of the picture, feels like the clear guy to be the first team all-conference quarterback. He's the clear guy to be the preseason SIAC player of the year. Like, these things all easily track. They easily track. So to me, this was a no-brainer. But when you start seeing the accumulation of all of these players, that's when it gets to being ridiculous. The running back top 5 in yards last year. You're looking at the wide receivers. Let's see. Wide receivers a little bit farther down. You have 7 and 8 with Williams and Jackson being there. So, but still, it's just, to me, this is just a ridiculous collection of talent on one side. It's no surprise that Albany State was voted first team, or number 1 in the polls. One thing that you do notice is that Clark Atlanta is 2. And we just talked about getting Armone Harris back, but this is before getting back Harris. This is with Zy McDonald at quarterback. There's still very high expectations for Clark Atlanta. Coming off of a year that was special because you haven't been that good in forever, right? To still have that level of expectation despite knowing that you're going to lose your all-everything quarterback, your all-SIAC first team, your conference player of the year quarterback 2 times reigning. Like, this is a big deal, and you're still projected to be one of the best teams in the conference. This speaks volumes to me. And then also Miles at 4th place. I know I'm skipping over to Tuskegee, but Miles at 4th place, even though they lost Sam Shade, that equally tells me something, because Shade is your quarterback. I mean, it's your coach. Shade is the leader of your team. Shade took some players from Miles. Some players from Miles just left. So you're still losing, but they feel confident enough to say, hey, this is a 4th place squad. I wish that the SIAC would have given points, kind of like the SWAC and the MEAC had, because then you could talk about how close they were. Fourth block, Jesus. Fourth place could be a good distance away from 3rd, right? Like, there could be a gap between Clark, Albany, Tuskegee, and then gap. Could be, but we don't know. So right now, 4th is still pretty solid for everything that's going on with Miles. But on tomorrow's episode, we'll be back with some of the big time news that's going on. We're getting closer and closer to the season. I expect that we're going to start seeing and hearing more and more news. One thing that I think we will discuss tomorrow is the trust issues that really, it seems like, slowed down Grambling's progress in the first year of the Mickey Joseph era. So let's get into that on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.